I don't care what you have to say. I want you to leave. I can't believe you came here after everything.
She walked away, Doctor. I told you I don't want to see her.
I understand you're upset, but
She is very worried about you.
This may be the only proof of the truth.
I don't want her here. I heard my daughter's voice before I saw her. Cold. Final. Like a door slamming shut after 30 years of silence. I stood frozen outside Rachel's hospital room, my hand still resting on the door I wasn't allowed to open. Through the narrow glass window, I saw her turn away from me, refusing even a glance, as if I were a stranger, or worse, a memory she had already buried. "They told me she's my mother," she said to the doctor. But she walked away from me. She made that choice. My fingers tightened around the old hospital bracelet in my pocket. Because the truth was, I never got to choose. And tonight, that bracelet might be the only thing left that could prove it. If this moment already stirred something in you, stay with me. Like this video, subscribe. If you believe some truths take years to surface, and tell me in the comments. Have you ever been misunderstood by someone you loved? And before we go on, where are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? People think silence is weakness. That if you don't defend yourself, if you don't argue, if you don't fight back, then whatever they say about you must be true. For most of my life, I let my daughter believe I was the kind of woman who could walk away from her own child. And the worst part, I understood why she believed it. Rachel Emerson was 8 years old the last time she saw me as her mother. I remember her that morning, small, stubborn, her brown hair tied into 2 uneven ponytails. Because she never had the patience to sit still long enough for me to fix them properly. She had been sitting at the kitchen table, swinging her legs under the chair, arguing with me about something that felt important at the time. "I don't want pancakes," she had insisted, her arms crossed tightly. "I want cereal like Dad eats," I had laughed softly, turning from the stove. "Since when do you like cereal?" "Since today." That was Rachel, always deciding things suddenly like she could change the world just by saying it out loud. If I had known that would be the last normal morning we'd ever share, I would have let her eat whatever she wanted. Instead, I poured syrup onto her pancakes and told her she'd thank me later. She didn't, because later never came the way it was supposed to. By the time Rachel was old enough to understand what leaving meant, she had already been told the story over and over again until it hardened into truth. Your mother left us. Your mother chose someone else. Your mother didn't want this family anymore. Thomas Emerson was very careful with his words. He never shouted them, never made it sound like anger. He made it sound like fact, and facts are harder to question. I wasn't there to correct him. I wasn't there to hold Rachel and tell her she was wrong. I wasn't there at all, and that absence became my crime. Years passed the way they always do, quietly, relentlessly, without asking permission. Rachel grew up without me. I missed everything. Her first day of middle school, her first heartbreak. The moment she decided she wanted to become a lawyer, though I only learned that years later, from a distance I was never supposed to cross. I saw her once. She didn't see me. It was her high school graduation. I stood at the back of the crowd far enough that no one would recognize me, but close enough to see her walk across the stage. She looked so much taller, stronger. There was something in the way she held her shoulders straight, unshakable, that made my chest ache. That wasn't something she got from me. That came from surviving without me. When her name was called Rachel Emerson, I forgot how to breathe. I wanted to scream, to stand up and tell everyone that she was mine, That I had been there before all of this. That I had held her when she cried, that I had stayed up through fevers and nightmares, that I had loved her long before she learned how to hate me. But I didn't move. Because I had learned by then that showing up didn't mean being allowed in. So I watched from the shadows while she took her diploma and walked off that stage without ever knowing I was there. That became my role in her life. The invisible witness. I followed her story in fragments. A neighbor's conversation overheard at a grocery store. A photograph posted online by someone who didn't know I was searching. A wedding announcement in a local paper. Rachel Emerson marries Jonathan Reed. I read that line at my kitchen table alone, my hands trembling so badly I had to set the paper down. There was a picture of her in a white dress, smiling in a way I hadn't seen since she was a child. Thomas stood beside her, proud, present, untouched by the truth he had buried. There was no space in that photo for someone like me. Still, I bought a gift. A small one. Nothing that would draw attention. I left it anonymously at the reception venue with no name, no note, just a simple silver locket. Inside, I had placed a photograph. Not of me, but of her. Taken years ago when she was 6, sitting on my lap in the backyard, both of us laughing at something I can't even remember anymore. I don't know if she ever opened it. I don't know if she ever threw it away. That's the thing about loving someone from a distance. You don't get answers. You don't get closure. You just keep giving pieces of yourself and hoping they land somewhere that still remembers you. When Rachel became a lawyer, I heard about it from Daniel Pierce. He had been a friend of mine before everything fell apart. One of the few people who knew enough of the truth to look at me without judgment. She's good, he told me one afternoon over coffee. Really good. Sharp. Doesn't miss anything. I smiled, even though it hurt. She always was, I said. He hesitated before asking, "Have you ever thought about telling her I looked down at my hands?" "I've thought about it every day," I admitted. "Then why don't you?" "Because what do you say to someone who has built their entire life on a version of you that isn't real? How do you walk into that and expect them to believe you?" "She doesn't want the truth," I said quietly. "She wants the story she's been told. And I had let that story live for so long. It had grown stronger than anything I could offer in return. So I stayed away. Not because I didn't care, but because every time I tried to step closer, the door closed harder. The last time I knocked on it, Rachel didn't even let me finish speaking. "You don't get to come back now," she had said, her voice steady, her eyes colder than anything I had ever seen. "You made your choice a long time ago." I had tried to tell her. I really had. "Rachel, please, it's not what you think." "It never is," she cut in. "For people like you, there's always an excuse. People like you, not Mom, not even Lucy, just someone she had already decided I was." The door closed in my face that day, and something inside me closed with it. So when I stood outside her hospital room, now hearing that same certainty in her voice, I didn't feel surprised. I felt tired. Tired of fighting a version of myself that had never existed. Tired of carrying a truth that no one wanted to hear. But this time, something was different. Because for the first time in decades, I wasn't empty-handed. My fingers pressed against the thin plastic band in my pocket. The hospital bracelet, worn, faded, but still legible. Lucy Emerson. Date, October 14th. The day Rachel believed I walked away. The day everything actually fell apart. And maybe, just maybe, the day the truth finally found its way back to her. The morning I left my family didn't begin with silence. It began with shouting. Not the kind that explodes all at once, but the kind that builds layer by layer until every word feels like it might crack something that can't be repaired. Thomas and I had been arguing for weeks before that day. No, not arguing, circling. Avoiding the real issue, pretending we were fighting about small things, money schedules, Rachel's school who forgot to pick up groceries. But underneath all of it was something darker. Something neither of us wanted to name out loud. Until that morning. Rachel was in the kitchen just a few feet away, pushing her pancakes around her plate while we tried to keep our voices low. We failed. "You think I don't know what you've been doing?" Thomas snapped, his voice cutting through the room like glass. I froze. "Keep your voice down," I said, glancing toward Rachel, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "She's right there." "She deserves to know," he shot back. Rachel looked up, then her eyes moving between us, confused but curious. "Know what?" she asked. My heart dropped. "Nothing, sweetheart," I said quickly. "Your dad and I are just lying again." Thomas interrupted, his tone bitter. I turned toward him, my chest tightening. "This is not the time. It's never the time for you," he said. "That's the problem, Lucy. You keep pretending everything's fine when it isn't. That's not fair." "No," he laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You've been sneaking around for months." Rachel's fork clattered against her plate. "What does that mean?" she asked. I stepped forward, lowering my voice. "Thomas, stop." "Well, talk about this later." "No," he said louder now. "We're talking about it now." I felt something inside me begin to crack, not anger, not exactly, more like panic. "Rachel." I stepped forward, lowering my voice. "Thomas, stop." "Well, talk about this later." "No," he said louder now. "We're talking about it now." I felt something inside me begin to crack, not anger, not exactly, more like panic. "Rachel," I said gently, "can you go upstairs for a minute?" She didn't move. "I'm not a baby," she said. "You always tell me to tell the truth. So what is it?" Thomas looked at me, waiting, daring me. I shook my head slowly. "Please," I whispered, not like this, but he didn't stop. "She's been lying to us," he said, looking directly at Rachel now. "Your mother hasn't been where she says she's been." Rachel's face changed. Confusion first, then something else, something sharper. "Is that true?" she asked me. I opened my mouth, but no words came out, because the truth wasn't simple, and there was no way to explain it in a moment like this without destroying everything. My voice faltered. "It's complicated," Thomas scoffed. "That's one way to put it." "Stop it," I said more firmly now. "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand just fine," he snapped. "You've been disappearing for hours at a time, making excuses, lying about where you go. What exactly am I supposed to think?" Rachel stood up from the table. "Mom," she said, her voice smaller now. "Where have you been going?" I looked at her, really looked at her. At the little girl who trusted me completely, who believed that I would always be the one to tell her the truth. And I realized in that moment that no matter what I said, something would break. I swallowed hard. "I've been helping someone." "Who?" Rachel asked. Thomas crossed his arms. "Yes, Lucy. Who?" I hesitated, and that hesitation was enough. Rachel stepped back like I had already answered. "You're lying," she said quietly. "No," I said quickly. "Rachel, I would never." "You just did," she cut in. The room felt too small suddenly, too loud, too full of things I couldn't fix. "I need some air," I said, my voice shaking. "We'll talk about this when I get back." "Of course," Thomas muttered. "Run away. That's what you do best." I grabbed my keys before I could think better of it. Rachel didn't try to stop me. She just stood there, her arms wrapped around herself, looking at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. That look. It followed me all the way out the door. I don't remember getting into the car. I don't remember starting the engine. I just remember the feeling in my chest, tight, suffocating, like I couldn't breathe properly. I drove without thinking, past familiar streets that suddenly felt foreign, past the park where Rachel used to play, past the grocery store where we used to argue about cereal brands. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. Thomas's words echoed in my head. "You've been lying." Rachel's voice followed right behind them. "You're lying." I wasn't. But I couldn't prove that. Not in a way they would understand. Not without revealing something I had been trying to protect for months. Something I wasn't ready to explain. Something that would change everything. I wiped at my eyes, not realizing I had been crying until my vision blurred. The road ahead stretched out empty, except for a single car in the distance. I should have pulled over. I know that now. But at the time, all I could think about was getting away from that moment, from that look in Rachel's eyes, from the realization that I was losing her and didn't know how to stop it. The sound came first, a sharp, sudden screech. Tires, metal, then impact. Everything happened at once. The steering wheel jerked violently in my hands. The world spun sideways. Glass shattered around me, 1,000 tiny fragments, catching the light like falling stars. Pain exploded through my body, sharp, blinding, impossible to locate. I tried to breathe. I couldn't. There was a smell, burning rubber, something electrical. Voices somewhere in the distance. Or maybe in my head. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" I wanted to answer. I really did, but the words wouldn't come. My thoughts slipped like water through my fingers. The last thing I remember before everything went dark was Rachel, standing in the kitchen, looking at me like I had already left. And then, nothing. No time, no sound, no memory. Just a long, endless silence, the kind you don't come back from the same. When I opened my eyes again, the world didn't make sense. Not in the way people describe confusion, like forgetting where you left your keys or losing track of time. This was something deeper, stranger. Like waking up inside someone else's life without being told the rules. The first thing I noticed was the light. Too bright. It cut through my eyelids even before I fully opened them, sharp and sterile. The kind of light that doesn't belong to homes or mornings or anything comforting. Hospitals have that kind of light. I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that my head hurt. A dull, throbbing ache that pulsed behind my eyes and spread down into my neck. Then came the sounds. Beeping. Soft, rhythmic. Voices muffled distant like they were coming from underwater. Lucy. The name floated toward me unfamiliar. "Lucy, can you hear me?" I blinked slowly, my vision swimming as shapes began to form. A man leaned over me, his face lined with concern. Gray hair, kind eyes. I didn't recognize him. I didn't recognize anything. "Do you know where you are?" he asked gently. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. My voice barely more than a whisper. "No." He nodded like he expected that answer. "That's okay," he said. "You've been through a serious accident. You're safe now." Safe. The word didn't mean anything to me, because I didn't remember what I was supposed to feel safe from. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked. I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to answer, because I didn't know how. There was a blank space where that answer should have been. I don't. My voice broke. Panic crept in, then slow at first, then all at once. I didn't know my name. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know why my body hurt, or why machines were keeping track of something I couldn't see. I didn't know anything. That's all right, the man said quickly, placing a hand on my shoulder. Don't force it. Memory loss can happen after trauma. We'll take this one step at a time. Memory loss. The words echoed in my mind, but they didn't settle. Because how do you understand losing something when you don't remember what you lost? Days passed, or at least I think they did. Time in a hospital doesn't move the way it does outside. It stretches folds, disappears entirely between moments of sleep and waking. They told me my name was Lucy Emerson. They told me I had been in a car accident. They told me I was lucky to be alive. But luck didn't feel like the right word. Because every time I looked at my hands, I felt like I was staring at a stranger. Every time I heard someone say my name, it sounded like they were talking about someone else. Lucy. 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 I repeated it to myself over and over again, trying to make it feel real. It didn't. A nurse named Alicia was the one who stayed with me the most. She had a calm way of speaking, like nothing I said would ever surprise her. You're doing better today, she told me one afternoon, adjusting the blanket around me. How can you tell? I asked. She smiled gently. You asked me that yesterday, too. I said, you asked me that yesterday, too. I stared at her. I did. A strange feeling settled in my chest. Not fear. Something quieter. Something heavier. Like realizing that even the moments I was living weren't staying with me. Will it come back? I asked. She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. We don't know yet, she said carefully. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it takes time. And if it doesn't? She didn't answer right away. We'll help you build new memories, she said instead. New memories. As if the old ones didn't matter. As if losing them wasn't the same as losing a part of myself I couldn't even name. There were flashes sometimes. Not full memories. Just feelings. A laugh that didn't belong to the room I was in. The warmth of something small curled against me. A voice calling out. But every time I reached for it, it disappeared. Like trying to hold on to smoke. One evening, I asked Alicia a question that had been sitting quietly in the back of my mind. Was I alone? I said. She looked up from the chart she was holding. What do you mean? When I came in, I clarified. Was there anyone with me? Her expression softened. No, she said gently. You were brought in by emergency services. No family at the scene? No family. The words landed harder than I expected. Has anyone come to see me? I asked. A pause. Then? No. Something inside me shifted. Not dramatically. Not in a way that made me cry or panic. Just a quiet settling. Like a truth I didn't remember but somehow understood. I was alone. Whoever Lucy Emerson had been before this. She didn't have anyone waiting for her. Or if she did, they weren't coming. Weeks turned into months. Physical therapy, follow-up tests, careful conversations about what I could and couldn't remember. The answer was always the same. Nothing that mattered. I learned how to walk steadily again, how to hold a conversation without losing track of it halfway through, how to exist in a world that felt like it had been handed to me without instructions. But there was one thing I couldn't learn. How to stop feeling like something was missing, not just memories, Something more. Something important. Sometimes, late at night, I would sit by the window in my hospital room and watch the city lights flicker in the distance, and I would feel it. A pull. A connection to something or someone I couldn't see. A sense that somewhere out there was a life I had lost. A life that still mattered. Even if I couldn't remember why. The day I was discharged, Alicia handed me a small plastic bag with my personal belongings. "Everything we recovered from the accident," she said. I opened it carefully. A set of keys, a wallet, some loose change, and a thin plastic bracelet, white, worn. The kind they put on patients when they're admitted. Lucy Emerson. The name looked back at me, printed in faded black ink. Beneath it, a date, October 14th. I stared at it longer than I should have, because something about that date felt important. Not in a way I could explain, just a quiet, persistent feeling that it meant more than I understood. "Is something wrong?" Alicia asked. I shook my head slowly. "No," I said. "I just feel like I should remember something." She nodded softly. "That's normal." But it didn't feel normal. It felt like standing at the edge of a memory I couldn't reach. Like there was a door, just slightly out of sight. And behind it, everything I had lost. When you lose your past, people expect you to start over. They say things like, "This is your second chance," or "You get to become whoever you want now." But no one talks about the emptiness. No one talks about the quiet moments when you're alone, when the world slows down and you realize that you don't know who you used to be, or if that person was worth remembering. After I left the hospital, they placed me in a small rehabilitation apartment just outside the city. It was clean, simple, temporary. A bed by the window, a narrow kitchen, a couch that still smelled like plastic and new fabric. Everything about it felt like a placeholder, like I was waiting for a life that hadn't arrived yet. I was given instructions, schedules, appointments, therapy sessions. I followed all of them carefully, like a student trying to pass a test without knowing the subject. Physical therapy came first. Learning how to trust my body again. My legs had healed, but not completely. There was a stiffness in my left side, a hesitation in every step, like my body remembered the accident even if my mind didn't. "Slow," my therapist would remind me. "Don't rush it." I nodded, even though I didn't know what I was rushing toward. There was no destination, just movement. Cognitive therapy came next. That was harder. They showed me photographs, objects, faces. "Does this mean anything to you?" they would ask. The answer was always the same. No. At first, I tried harder. I stared at each image, willing something, anything to come back. A spark, a recognition, a feeling. But there was nothing. Just blank space where memories should have been. Eventually, I stopped forcing it. Because every time I failed, it felt like losing something all over again. Daniel Pierce was the only person who visited me. The first time he showed up, I didn't know who he was. He stood in the doorway of my apartment holding a paper bag and looking at me like he was seeing a ghost. "Lucy," he said quietly. I tilted my head. "Do I know you?" Something flickered across his face, pain maybe, but he covered it quickly. "I'm an old friend," he said. Daniel. The name meant nothing to me. Still, I stepped aside and let him in. He placed the bag on the counter. "I brought you lunch. Thought you might be tired of hospital food." "I don't remember hospital food," I said. He gave a small, sad smile. That might be a blessing. We sat across from each other at the tiny kitchen table. He watched me carefully, like he was trying to find pieces of someone he used to know. "Do you remember anything at all?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not really, just feelings sometimes, but they don't make sense." He nodded slowly. "That's something," he said. "Is it?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "It means it's still in there somewhere." I wanted to believe him, but hope is a strange thing when you don't have anything to attach it to. Over time, Daniel became part of my new routine. He visited once a week. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't. He never pushed me to remember anything, which made it easier to let him stay. One afternoon, as we sat in silence, I asked him a question that had been sitting in my mind for days. "Did I have a family?" I said. He didn't answer right away, and that hesitation, that small pause, told me everything I needed to know. "Yes," he said finally. My chest tightened. "Where are they?" He looked down at his hands. He didn't answer right away, and that hesitation, that small pause, told me everything I needed to know. "Yes," he said finally. My chest tightened. "Where are they?" He looked down at his hands. It's complicated. That word again. Complicated. It seemed like everything about my past was wrapped in that one word. "I'd like to know," I said quietly. He looked up at me, something conflicted in his expression. "I don't know if you're ready for that," he admitted. "I don't even know what I'm ready for," I said. "But I deserve to know, don't I?" He sighed. "Yes," he said. "You do." But he didn't tell me. Not that day, not the next. Weeks passed, and every time I asked, he gave me the same answer. Soon. I didn't understand why. If I had a family, why weren't they here? Why hadn't anyone come looking for me? Why did it feel like there was a story everyone else knew except me? The questions started to pile up, and with them, something else began to grow. A quiet frustration. Not anger. Not yet. Just a need to understand. One evening, I found myself going through the small box of belongings I had brought from the hospital. I had avoided it before. It felt too personal, too connected to a version of me I couldn't access. But that night, something pushed me to open it. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the questions. Or maybe it was the feeling that if I didn't start searching, I would never find anything at all. Inside the box were the same items I had seen before. Keys, wallet, loose change, and the bracelet. I picked it up again, holding it between my fingers. Lucy Emerson. October 14th. The letters were slightly faded now, but still clear enough to read. I traced them slowly, as if touching the name might make it feel more real. "This is me," I whispered. But it didn't feel like me. Not yet. Still that date. It pulled at something inside me. Not a memory. Something deeper. Something emotional. I closed my eyes, focusing on it. October 14th. October 14th. And then, for a brief second, a flash. Not a full image, just a fragment. A child's voice. "Mom." My eyes snapped open. My heart raced, my breath catching in my throat. It was gone just as quickly as it came, but it had been there. Real. Sharp. A voice that didn't belong to the present. A voice that belonged to before. "Mom," I repeated softly. The word felt strange on my tongue. Heavy. Important. And suddenly, the question I had been asking Daniel felt different. Not just curiosity anymore. Something stronger. Something urgent. Because if someone had called me Mom, then somewhere out there was a child who had lost me. Or worse, a child who believed I had left. And for the first time since I woke up in that hospital bed, I felt something close to fear. Not for myself, but for the life I couldn't remember. And the damage I might have caused without even knowing it. The first time I asked Daniel to tell me the truth, he avoided it. The second time, he delayed it. The third time, he realized I wasn't going to stop. I need to know, I told him, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. Not pieces, not soon. I need the truth. We were sitting in the same small apartment, same table, same quiet space, but something had changed. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was the fact that I had started remembering something, even if it was only a voice. Or maybe it was the growing feeling that whatever had been taken from me was too important to stay buried. Daniel leaned back in his chair, rubbing his hands together like he was trying to warm them, even though the room wasn't cold. You had a daughter, he said finally. The words landed softly, but they echoed. A daughter. I swallowed my fingers, tightening slightly on the edge of the table. What's her name? I asked. Rachel. The moment he said it, something shifted inside me. Not a memory, not fully, but a feeling. Warm. Familiar. Like hearing a song you don't remember the lyrics to, but somehow still know. Rachel, I repeated quietly. Daniel nodded. Rachel Emerson. I closed my eyes for a second, letting the name settle. She's the one who called me Mom, I said more to myself than to him. Yes, he said. A silence stretched between us. Then I asked the question that had been sitting at the center of everything. Why isn't she here? Daniel didn't answer right away. And that hesitation, that same hesitation I had seen so many times before, made something tighten in my chest. Daniel, I said more firmly now. He exhaled slowly. Because she thinks you left her, he said. The words hit harder than I expected. Left her, I repeated. He nodded. When she was 8, something inside me recoiled. No, I said instinctively. That's not right. I know, he said quietly. But she believes it. I shook my head, my heart beginning to race. That doesn't make sense, I said. Why would she think that? Because that's what she was told. By who? Daniel hesitated. Then Thomas. The name meant nothing to me, but the way Daniel said it made it feel heavy. Who is Thomas? I asked. Daniel looked at me carefully. Your husband, he said. The room felt smaller suddenly. My husband? Yes. Where is he now? Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. Still around, he said. Still part of her life. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process everything at once. A daughter. A husband. A life I didn't remember. And somehow in that life, I had become the kind of person who walked away from her own child. No, I said again, more firmly this time. That's not who I am. Daniel's eyes softened. I know, he said, but she doesn't. The words sat between us like something fragile and dangerous. What happened? I asked. Daniel rubbed his face like he was deciding how much to say. You were in an accident, he said. A bad one. But she doesn't. The words sat between us like something fragile and dangerous. What happened? I asked. Daniel rubbed his face like he was deciding how much to say. You were in an accident, he said. A bad one. I know that part, I said. They told me. But they didn't tell her, he continued. I frowned. What do you mean? I mean, she never knew. A cold feeling crept through me. She thought I just left. Yes, and no one told her otherwise. Daniel shook his head, not in a way she believed. I stood up suddenly, pacing the small space of the apartment. That doesn't make any sense, I said, my voice rising slightly. Hospitals have records. There had to be something. There was not in a way she believed. I stood up suddenly, pacing the small space of the apartment. That doesn't make any sense, I said, my voice rising slightly. Hospitals have records. There had to be something. There was, Daniel said. I stopped. Then why didn't she see it? Because she wasn't looking for it, he said quietly. She already had an answer, one that made sense to her. I pressed my hands against my temples, trying to steady myself. So let me get this straight, I said. I was in an accident. I lost my memory. I couldn't come back. And during all of that, my daughter was told I abandoned her. Yes, and she believed it. For how long? Daniel hesitated. 30 years. The number hit like a physical blow. 30 years. 30 years of believing I didn't love her. 30 years of thinking I chose to leave. 30 years of building a life around a lie. I sank back into the chair, the weight of it pressing down on me. That's not fair, I whispered. No, Daniel agreed. It isn't. No, Daniel agreed. It isn't. I stared at the floor, my thoughts racing. Did I ever try to find her? I asked. Yes, he said immediately. How you came back, he said. After your memory started to return, you went to see her. And Ed at the floor, my thoughts racing. Did I ever try to find her? I asked. Yes, he said immediately. How you came back, he said. After your memory started to return, you went to see her. And Daniel looked away. She didn't want to see you. The words hurt more than I expected. Even without the memories, the feeling was there. Rejection. Did I tell her the truth? I asked. You tried. She didn't believe you. I let out a shaky breath. Of course she didn't. Why would she? If someone had spent years telling me a story, repeating it, reinforcing it, shaping my entire understanding of the past, why would I suddenly believe something different, especially from the person I thought had hurt me the most? She thinks I'm lying, I said. Yes, and she hates me. Daniel didn't answer. He didn't need to. I could feel it, not because I remembered, but because it made sense. Hatred doesn't come from nowhere. It grows. It builds. It roots itself in something deep. And if Rachel had spent 30 years believing I abandoned her, then that hatred wasn't just possible. It was inevitable. What is she like? I asked after a moment. Daniel's expression softened. She's strong, he said. Smart, determined. A small, unexpected smile touched my lips. She sounds like someone I'd be proud of. You would be, he said. You always were. The words lingered in the air. You always were. Even without memories, something inside me responded to that. a quiet certainty, a sense that whoever I had been, I had loved her. Fiercely, unconditionally. "Where is she now?" I asked. Daniel hesitated again, but this time it wasn't the same kind of hesitation. This one felt heavier. "She's in the hospital," he said. My heart skipped. "Why?" "Complications," he said. "Something serious." I stood up immediately. "I need to see her." Daniel looked at me carefully. "Lucy." "She's my daughter," I said, my voice firm despite the uncertainty inside me. "Even if I don't remember everything, that doesn't change." He nodded slowly. "It doesn't," he agreed. "But she may not feel the same way." "I don't care," I said. "She's sick. She shouldn't be alone." Daniel studied me for a moment. Then finally, "Okay," he said. "I'll take you." And just like that, for the first time in 30 years, I was going back to her. Even if she didn't want me there. Even if she never forgave me. Because this time, I wasn't going to stay away. The hospital looked exactly the way I remembered it. Not because I had been there before, not in the way memory works, but because something about it felt familiar in a way that settled deep in my bones. The smell of antiseptic, the quiet hum of machines, the soft, careful footsteps of nurses moving quickly, but never loudly. It didn't feel like a new place. It felt like a place I had once belonged to. "Are you okay?" Daniel asked as we walked through the entrance. I nodded slowly, even though I wasn't sure that was true. I glanced around my chest, tightening slightly. "I feel like I've been here before." He gave a small, knowing look. "You have." Of course I had, but not like this. Not as someone searching for her daughter. Not as someone who didn't know if she would be allowed inside. We stopped at the front desk. "I'm here to see Rachel Emerson," I said. The receptionist typed something into her computer, her eyes flicking back to me briefly. "Family?" she asked. The word caught in my throat. "Family. I'm her mother," I said. The receptionist paused, just for a second, but it was enough for me to notice. Then she nodded politely. "Room 312, she said. "But you'll need to check with the attending nurse before entering." Of course. Nothing was going to be simple. Nothing had been simple for a long time. We took the elevator in silence. Each floor that passed felt heavier than the last, like I was moving closer to something that might either fix everything or break it beyond repair. When the doors opened, the hallway stretched out in front of us, long quiet, lined with identical doors. Some open, some closed, some holding moments of hope. Others, something else entirely. "Room 312 is this way," Daniel said softly. I followed him, my steps slower now. Not because I didn't want to go, but because I suddenly realized I didn't know what I was walking into. What do you say to a daughter who believes you abandoned her? What do you say when you don't even remember leaving, but know that she's been living with that pain for decades? We reached the room. The door was slightly open. I could hear voices inside. A doctor, a nurse, and then her. "I already told you," Rachel said, her voice strained but still sharp. "I don't need anyone else coming in here." Even weak, she sounded strong, determined, exactly the way Daniel had described her. Rachel, the doctor, said gently, "It's just hospital protocol." "Family members, I don't have family," she cut in. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stopped just outside the door, my breath catching. No family, because of me. Daniel looked at me, his expression cautious. "You don't have to do this right now," he whispered. But I shook my head. "I do," I said quietly. "Because if I turned away now, I might never come back." I stepped forward, pushed the door open, and for the first time in 30 years, I saw her. Rachel Emerson. She was sitting up in the hospital bed, her face pale, but her posture still firm, like she refused to let anything, not even illness, make her look weak. Her hair was shorter than I imagined, her features sharper, older. Of course, she was older. 30 years older than the little girl I had somehow carried inside me without remembering. The doctor turned toward me first. "Can I help you?" he asked. But Rachel didn't need an introduction. She knew. Her eyes locked onto mine immediately, and I saw it. Not confusion, not curiosity, recognition. Cold, instant. "You shouldn't be here," she said. No hesitation, no softness, just certainty. The room fell silent. My voice faltered for a moment before I found it again. "I heard you were in the hospital." And she asked. Her gaze didn't waver, didn't soften, didn't give me anything to hold on to. "I wanted to see you," I said. She let out a quiet, bitter laugh. "After 30 years. The doctor and nurse exchanged a glance, then quietly stepped out of the room, closing the door behind them, leaving us alone, just the two of us, mother and daughter. "Strangers, you don't get to do that," Rachel continued, her voice low but cutting. "You don't get to disappear and then show up like this, like it means something." "I didn't disappear," I said, quickly. Her expression hardened. "Don't," she warned. "Don't start lying now." "I'm not lying," I said, my heart racing. "Rachel, please." "No," she snapped. "You don't get to say my name like that." The words stopped me. Like I had crossed a line I didn't even know existed. "You lost that right a long time ago." Silence filled the room again. Thick, heavy. I felt it pressing against my chest, making it hard to breathe. I don't remember everything I said carefully, but I know I didn't choose to leave you. Rachel shook her head slowly, her eyes filled with something deeper than anger. Disbelief. "You expect me to believe that she asked? After all this time, I'm asking you to listen," I said. "I listened for years," she shot back. "I waited. I hoped. I made excuses for you when other people didn't." Her voice cracked slightly, but she didn't let it break. But at some point, she continued, "You stop waiting for someone who isn't coming back." The words settled into me like something final. "I came back," I said softly. Too late. The simplicity of it hurt more than anything else she had said. Too late. Maybe she was right. Maybe everything I had lost, everything I had forgotten, had cost me the one thing I could never get back. "I didn't have a choice," I whispered. Rachel looked at me for a long moment. Then she leaned back against the pillow, exhaustion finally breaking through her defenses. "That's what people like you always say," she murmured. "People like you. Not Mom. Not Lucy. Just someone she had already decided I was." "You should go," she said after a moment. "I don't want you here." The words echoed in my mind just like they had outside the door earlier. I stood there for a second longer, unsure what to do. What to say? Because nothing I said seemed to matter. Nothing reached her. And maybe it wasn't supposed to. Not yet. Slowly, I nodded. "Okay," I said, and then I turned, walked toward the door, each step heavier than the last. But before I reached it, I brought something, I said quietly. She didn't respond, didn't look at me. Still, I reached into my pocket, pulled out the bracelet, held it in my hand for just a second before placing it gently on the table beside her bed. I think this matters, I said. Then I walked out, not knowing that I had just left behind the one thing that could change everything. I didn't go far after leaving her room. I couldn't. My legs carried me down the hallway, past the nurse's station, past the elevators, until I reached a small waiting area with a row of empty chairs facing a window that overlooked the parking lot. And then I just stopped, sat down, stared. Because for the first time since I had stepped into that hospital, the reality of what had just happened settled in completely. She didn't want me. Not in the quiet, uncertain way I had feared, but in a clear, deliberate, final way. I don't want you here. Her voice echoed in my mind over and over again. And the worst part was, I understood it. Even without my memories, I could feel the weight of what she had carried for all those years. 30 years of believing I had abandoned her. 30 years of unanswered questions. 30 years of pain that had nowhere to go except into anger. How could I expect her to let that go in a single moment? How could I expect her to look at me and see anything other than the woman who left? I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, pressing my hands together as if that might hold me together. She looked at you, Daniel said quietly, sitting down beside me. That's something. I let out a small, hollow laugh. She looked at me like I was a stranger, I said. That's still something, he repeated gently. I shook my head. No, I said. It's exactly what she's supposed to do. Silence settled between us. Not uncomfortable, just heavy. I left the bracelet, I said after a moment. Daniel turned slightly. What, in her room? I clarified. On the table. He frowned slightly. Are you sure that was a good idea? I don't know, I admitted. But it's the only thing I have that proves I didn't just walk away. He studied me for a moment. Then maybe she'll look at it, he said. Maybe. But hope felt dangerous. Hope meant expecting something, and I wasn't sure I was ready for that kind of disappointment again. Upstairs, in room 312, Rachel Emerson stared at the ceiling long after I had left. She told herself she didn't care. She told herself it didn't matter. That the woman who had just walked into her room was just someone trying to rewrite a story that had already been written. But something about the way I had said her name, the hesitation, the uncertainty, the way my voice had almost broken, it didn't match the version of me she had held onto for years. And that unsettled her. You don't get to do that, she muttered to herself, turning her head away from the door. But her eyes drifted despite herself to the small table beside her bed. And there it was, the bracelet. She hadn't noticed it before, or maybe she had, and chosen to ignore it. But now it sat there quiet and unassuming, like it had been waiting for her attention. Rachel frowned slightly. What is that? She murmured. She reached for it slowly, her movements still careful from the weakness in her body. The plastic felt light in her hand. Ordinary. The kind of thing hospitals give out every day. There was nothing special about it, except her eyes caught the name, Lucy Emerson. Her grip tightened slightly. Of course it had her name on it. That didn't prove anything. Anyone could have. Her thoughts stopped. Her gaze dropped to the line beneath the name. The date. October 14th. Her breath caught. Because that date. She knew that date. She had memorized it without ever realizing it. It was the day everything changed. The day her mother left. The day her life split into before and after. Rachel sat there staring at the bracelet, her mind suddenly racing. No, it had to be a coincidence. It didn't mean anything. It couldn't. She swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. "Excuse me," she called out. A nurse stepped into the room a moment later. "Yes." Rachel held up the bracelet. "Where did this come from?" The nurse glanced at it. "Oh," she said. "That's an old patient band. Must have been mixed in with some archived belongings we were sorting earlier." Rachel frowned. "Archived?" "Yeah," the nurse said casually. "Sometimes old items get stored for years, especially if they were part of a long-term case or something unusual." Rachel's heart began to beat faster. "How old?" she asked. The nurse shrugged slightly. "Hard to say exactly. Could be decades." Decades. Rachel looked back down at the bracelet. Lucy Emerson. October 14th. Her fingers trembled slightly. What kind of case would keep something like this? She asked. The nurse hesitated, then glanced at the chart at the foot of the bed. "Well, severe trauma cases sometimes," she said. "Patients who are here for a long time. Or cases involving memory loss." Rachel's head snapped up. "Memory loss." The nurse nodded. "Yeah, it happens with serious head injuries." Why Rachel didn't answer? Because suddenly everything felt off. Not wrong, not yet, but not right. Eat her. Like a piece of a puzzle had shifted. Memory loss. The nurse nodded. "Yeah, it happens with serious head injuries." Why? Rachel didn't answer. Because suddenly everything felt off. Not wrong, not yet, but not right either. Like a piece of a puzzle had shifted just enough to make her question the entire picture. "That's all," Rachel said, finally, her voice quieter now. The nurse nodded and stepped out of the room, leaving Rachel alone. Alone with the bracelet and the date that refused to let her breathe. She stared at it for a long time. Longer than she wanted to admit, because the more she looked at it, the harder it became to ignore the question forming in the back of her mind. What if? No. She shook her head. "No," she said out loud. "That doesn't change anything." But her voice didn't sound as certain as it had before, because for the first time in 30 years, there was a crack. Small, fragile, but real. And through that crack, doubt began to slip in. The next morning, Rachel didn't ask for breakfast. She didn't turn on the television. She didn't even reach for her phone. She just sat there. The bracelet lay on the table beside her bed, exactly where I had left it. But now, it wasn't just an object anymore. It was a question. And Rachel Emerson had never been the kind of person who could ignore a question once it started to take shape. She picked it up again, turning it slowly between her fingers. Lucy Emerson, October 14th. Her jaw tightened. 30 years. 30 years she had lived with one version of the truth. Her mother left. No goodbye, no explanation, no attempt to come back. That version had shaped everything, her choices, her relationships, her ability or inability to trust. And now, suddenly, there was this, a hospital bracelet. From the exact same day everything had fallen apart. "Coincidence," she whispered, but it didn't feel like one. Because if it was a coincidence, why did it feel like something had just shifted under her feet? Rachel swung her legs carefully over the side of the bed, ignoring the dull ache in her body. The nurse had told her to rest, to take it easy. But rest felt impossible now. Not with this sitting in her hand. She pressed the call button. When the nurse returned, Rachel didn't waste time. "I need access to hospital records," she said. The nurse blinked in surprise. "Records?" "Yes," Rachel said. "From October 14th, about 30 years ago." The nurse hesitated. "That's not something we can just pull up without authorization." "I can get authorization," Rachel said quickly. "I just need to know if a patient named Lucy Emerson was admitted here that day." The nurse shifted slightly, clearly uncomfortable. "I understand why you're asking," she said gently. "But those kinds of records are protected. You'd need to go through administration." "Then tell me where to go," Rachel insisted. There was a sharpness in her voice now, something urgent, something that hadn't been there before. The nurse studied her for a moment. "Then tell me where to go," Rachel insisted. There was a sharpness in her voice now, something urgent, something that hadn't been there before. The nurse studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I'll have someone come talk to you," she said. Rachel leaned back against the bed, her heart beating faster than it should have. Not from fear, from something else, something closer to possibility. Downstairs, I hadn't slept. I had gone back to the apartment with Daniel, but the moment I stepped inside, it felt wrong. Too quiet. Too empty. Too far away from her. So I sat by the window. All night, watching the same lights I had watched before. But this time, they didn't feel distant. They felt like something I needed to get back to. "She told me to leave," I said quietly. Daniel stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "I know," he said, "and I did." I continued, just like that. He didn't respond, because we both knew that was the pattern, the version of me Rachel believed in, the one who left, the one who didn't fight to stay. "I don't want to be that person," I said. "You're not," Daniel said firmly. "But she thinks I am." He stepped closer. "Then prove her wrong." I let out a small breath. "How?" I asked. "She won't even listen to me." "Then don't start with words," he said. "Start with something she can't ignore." My mind immediately went to the bracelet. "I already tried that," I said. "No." Daniel shook his head. "You gave her a piece of the truth. Now you need to give her the rest." I frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" He hesitated for a moment, then spoke carefully. "There are records, Lucy," he said. "From the accident, from the hospital, from everything that happened after." My chest tightened. Then why didn't anyone show her? Daniel's expression darkened. "Because Thomas controlled the narrative," he said. "And by the time anyone questioned it, Rachel had already made up her mind." I stared at him. "So all this time, the proof was there?" "Yes, and no one fought hard enough to make her see it." He didn't answer, because he didn't have to. I stood up slowly. "Then we do it now," I said. "Lucy." "No," I cut in. "If she's starting to question things even a little, then we can't wait." Daniel studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Okay," he said. "But we do it carefully." Upstairs, Rachel sat across from a hospital administrator who looked far too calm for the store, I'm building inside her. "I understand this is important to you," the woman said, folding her hands neatly on the desk. "But accessing records from that far back isn't immediate. It could take time. How much time I'm building inside her." "I understand this is important to you," the woman said, folding her hands neatly on the desk. "But accessing records from that far back isn't immediate. It could take time." How much time? Rachel asked. A few days at least. Rachel shook her head. No, she said. I don't have a few days. The woman frowned slightly. Why the urgency? Rachel hesitated, because saying it out loud made it real. But she said it anyway. Because I think I might have been wrong, she admitted. The words felt strange in her mouth. Unfamiliar. Heavy. And if I was, she continued, her voice quieter now, then I need to know before it's too late. The administrator studied her for a moment, then slowly she nodded. I'll see what I can do, she said. Rachel leaned back in her chair, her grip tightening slightly on the bracelet in her hand. For the first time in 30 years, she wasn't certain of her own story anymore. And that uncertainty was more terrifying than anything she had believed before. Because if she was wrong about her mother, then what else had she built her life on that wasn't true? Downstairs, I stood outside the hospital again. This time, I didn't hesitate. This time, I didn't wait. Because something had changed. I could feel it, like a shift in the air, like the moment right before a storm breaks. And for the first time since I had walked into that room, I felt something stronger than fear. Hope, not fragile, not uncertain, but steady. Because somewhere upstairs, Rachel was looking at that bracelet and asking the one question that could change everything. What if I'm wrong? And when that question finally finds its answer, nothing will ever be the same again. Waiting is harder than not knowing. Rachel had lived most of her life believing a lie, one that hurt, but at least it was stable. It had shape. It had certainty. Now everything felt unstable, and she hated it. The administrator had promised to expedite the records. That had been hours ago. Hours of silence. Hours of staring at the bracelet. Hours of asking herself questions she had never allowed before. What if she didn't leave? What if something happened? What if... Rachel shut her eyes tightly, forcing the thoughts away. No, she whispered. You don't get to rewrite this. But even as she said it, her voice lacked conviction. Because for the first time, the version of her mother she had held on to for 30 years didn't feel as solid as it once had. And that scared her more than anything. A soft knock came at the door. Rachel straightened immediately, instinctively putting the bracelet down. Come in. It wasn't the administrator. It was him, Thomas Emerson, her father. He stepped into the room with the same controlled presence Rachel had always known. Tall, composed, every movement deliberate. Hey, he said gently. I heard you had a visitor yesterday. Rachel's chest tightened. Of course he had heard. Nothing stayed quiet for long. Yeah, she said. He closed the door behind him, walking closer to the bed. I'm sorry I wasn't here, he said. I would have handled it. The words felt strange. I handled it, Rachel said. Thomas studied her face for a moment. And? He asked. Rachel hesitated, because she didn't know how to answer that. She left, Rachel said, finally. Thomas nodded like that was the expected outcome. Good, he said. She shouldn't have come. Rachel looked at him more closely now, at the certainty in his voice, at the lack of hesitation, and something about it didn't sit right. She said she didn't leave, Rachel said. Thomas's expression didn't change. They always say that, he replied calmly. They, Rachel asked. People who don't want to take responsibility, he said. It's easier to pretend something happened to you than admit you walked away. The words were familiar, too familiar. Rachel had heard versions of them her entire life. But now, they sounded rehearsed. "You never told me about an accident," Rachel said slowly. There it was. The shift. Subtle, but undeniable. Thomas's eyes flickered just for a second. "What accident?" he asked. Rachel reached for the bracelet, holding it up. "This," she said. "Same date she disappeared. Hospital admission band." Thomas glanced at it briefly, then looked back at her. "That doesn't mean anything," he said. "It could," Rachel pressed. "No," he said firmly. "It doesn't." Rachel's grip tightened slightly. "How do you know?" "Because I was there," he said. The answer came too quickly, too clean. Rachel felt her heartbeat pick up. "Then explain it to me," she said. Thomas' jaw tightened. "There's nothing to explain," he said. "Your mother left. That's what happened." Rachel felt her heartbeat pick up. "Then explain it to me," she said. Thomas's jaw tightened. "There's nothing to explain," he said. "Your mother left. That's what happened." Rachel didn't respond immediately. She just watched him, really watched him, and for the first time in her life, she noticed something she had never seen before. Not strength, not certainty, but control. Carefully maintained, carefully protected. "What if you're wrong?" she asked quietly. Thomas's eyes hardened. "I'm not." "But what if you are?" she pushed. "I said I'm not," he repeated, his voice sharper now. The room felt different, charged, unsteady. Rachel swallowed, forcing herself to keep going. "Why didn't you ever show me proof?" she asked. "Anything. A letter A. Report. Something that explains what actually happened." Thomas exhaled slowly, like he was losing patience. "Because there was nothing to show," he said. "That's not true," Rachel said. "There are always records, especially if—" "Rachel." The way he said her name stopped her. Not harsh, but final. "You're not thinking clearly right now," he said. "You're sick. You're vulnerable. And she knows that." Rachel felt something twist in her chest. "She came here because she knew you'd be weak enough to listen," he continued. "That's what people like her do." People like her. The same phrase, the same tone, the same narrative. But now, it sounded different. Not like truth, like something repeated too many times. "What if I want to listen?" Rachel asked. Thomas stared at her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, "You don't," he said. It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't concern. It was a statement. And something about that felt wrong. "I'm not a child anymore," Rachel said quietly. Thomas' expression softened slightly, but not in the way she expected. "I know," he said. "That's why I'm asking you to trust me." Trust. Another word she had built her life on. But now, it didn't feel as simple as it once had. A knock interrupted the moment. The administrator stepped into the room, holding a thin folder. "I have something," she said. Rachel's heart jumped. Thomas turned slightly, his posture shifting just enough to show he didn't like the interruption. "What is that?" he asked. "Archived records," the administrator said. "From October 14th, 30 years ago." The room went completely still. Rachel's eyes locked onto the folder. Her breath slowed. Everything narrowed to that single moment. "That's not necessary," Thomas said quickly. Rachel turned to him. "Actually," she said, her voice steady. "Now it is." The administrator stepped closer, placing the folder on the table between them. "Before you open it," she said carefully, "you should understand cases like this can be complicated." Rachel nodded. I already know that, she said. Her fingers hovered over the folder for a second. Then slowly, she opened it. The first page was simple. Patient intake form. Name Lucy Emerson. Date October 14th. Condition severe head trauma. Memory loss suspected. Rachel's breath caught. Her eyes moved faster now, scanning the words like they might disappear if she didn't hold on to them. Admitted unconscious. No identification beyond personal belongings. No immediate family present. Recommended long-term care. Her hands began to shake. No, she whispered. Thomas stepped forward. Rachel. She pulled the folder closer to her, away from him. No, she said again, louder this time, because this wasn't a story. This wasn't an excuse. This was evidence. Cold, clear, undeniable. And for the first time in 30 years, Rachel Emerson realized something that changed everything. Her mother hadn't left. She had been taken away, and the person who knew that had never told her. Rachel looked up slowly, not at the folder, not at the bracelet, but at the man standing in front of her, her father. And for the first time in her life, she didn't see certainty. She saw something else, something that had been hidden all along. And suddenly, the real question wasn't what happened to her mother. It was, why had he lied? The silence after the truth is louder than the lie. Rachel didn't close the folder right away. She couldn't. Her eyes stayed locked on the words, reading them again and again, as if repetition might somehow make them less real. Severe head trauma. Memory loss suspected. No immediate family present. Each line carved into her. Each line tearing apart something she had believed her entire life. Slowly, she lifted her head and looked at him. Thomas Emerson, her father. The man who had told her the story she built her life around. Why, she asked. It was a simple word, but it carried 30 years of weight. Thomas didn't answer immediately. For the first time since he walked into that room, he didn't look certain. Rachel, he began, his voice measured, careful. You don't understand the whole situation. Then explain it to me, she said. Her voice didn't rise, didn't shake, but something had changed. It was no longer a daughter asking her father for reassurance. It was a woman asking for the truth. You were 8 years old, he said slowly. You needed stability. I needed the truth, she cut in. His jaw tightened. You needed protection, he insisted, from what she demanded. Thomas exhaled, running a hand through his hair, a gesture she had never seen before. From confusion, he said. From uncertainty. From waiting for someone who might never come back. Rachel's grip on the folder tightened. She was in a hospital, she said, her voice breaking slightly despite her effort to keep it steady. She didn't leave. She couldn't come back. Thomas didn't deny it, but he didn't admit it either. I made a decision, he said. Rachel let out a sharp breath. You made a decision, she repeated. Yes, he said, as your father. To give you a life that wasn't built on waiting. Rachel stared at him, and suddenly something clicked into place. You didn't just lie, she said slowly. You erased her. The words hung in the air like something irreversible. Thomas' expression hardened. I did what I had to do. No, Rachel said, shaking her head. You did what was easier for you. That's not fair, he snapped. Isn't it? She shot back. You didn't want to explain. You didn't want to deal with it, so you told me she left and let me hate her for 30 years. Thomas took a step closer. I gave you a stable life, he said. I made sure you had everything you needed. Except the truth, Rachel said. The room fell silent again. But this silence was different. This one wasn't heavy with confusion. It was sharp, clear, cutting. You don't understand what it was like, Thomas said after a moment, his voice lower now. Watching her like that. Not knowing if she would ever wake up. Not knowing if she would ever be the same. Rachel's expression shifted slightly. Then why didn't you tell me that she asked? He hesitated. And that hesitation was the answer? Because you thought it would be easier if I believed she didn't care, Rachel said. Thomas didn't respond, because he couldn't. Rachel let out a slow, trembling breath. All those years, she said, every birthday, every holiday, every moment I needed her, I told myself she chose not to be there. Her voice cracked now, for the first time. And you let me believe that. Thomas looked at her, something like regret flickering in his eyes. I thought it would help you move on, he said quietly. Rachel laughed, but there was no humor in it. Move on, she repeated. I didn't move on. I built my entire life around that pain. She gestured to the folder. This changes everything. Thomas stepped forward again. Rachel, listen to me. No, she said, pulling back slightly. You listen. Her voice was stronger now, clearer. You took away my chance to understand her, she said. You took away my chance to forgive her or even miss her the right way. The words landed with a weight that neither of them could ignore, and now she continued. She's back. And I treated her like she was the villain in a story you wrote. Thomas opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Because there was nothing left to say. Rachel looked down at the bracelet in her hand. Lucy Emerson, October 14th, the day everything changed. Not because her mother left, but because her father decided what she should believe. I need to see her, Rachel said suddenly. Thomas' head snapped up. Rachel, I need to see her, she repeated. She's been gone for 30 years, Thomas said. You can't just... She hasn't been gone, Rachel cut in. You just made sure I thought she was. The words hit harder than anything else she had said. Thomas took a step back, and for the first time, he didn't try to stop her, because he knew. He couldn't. Rachel swung her legs over the side of the bed again, ignoring the pain. I'm not done, she said. You're not well enough to... I don't care, she snapped, because this wasn't about her health anymore. This was about something much deeper, something that had been broken for decades. And now, finally, had a broken for decades. And now, finally, had a chance to be repaired. Even if it hurt. Even if it was messy. Even if it didn't end the way she wanted. I need to hear it from her, Rachel said, her voice softer now, but no less determined. Not from you. Not from anyone else. Thomas watched her in silence, and for once he didn't argue, because the truth had already done what no argument could. It had broken his control. Rachel stood slowly steadying herself against the bed, the bracelet still in her hand, the folder left open behind her. And as she moved toward the door, she realized something that changed everything. For 30 years, she had been waiting for her mother to come back. Now it was her turn to go find her. I didn't expect her to come back, Not that day. Not after the way she looked at me. Not after the words she said, sharp, final, unshakable. I don't want you here. That sentence had followed me all night, settling into every quiet corner of my mind. So when I heard the knock on the apartment door the next morning, I didn't move at first. I thought maybe I imagined it, or maybe it was Daniel stopping by like he always did. But then it came again, more urgent this time. I stood slowly, my heart beginning to beat faster, not from fear, but from something I couldn't quite name yet. Hope, maybe, or something close to it. I walked to the door and opened it. And there she was, Rachel, standing there, pale, tired, still clearly unwell, but upright, present, real. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other. And this time, her eyes weren't cold. They weren't soft either, but they weren't closed off. There was something else there now, something searching. "Can I come in?" she asked. Her voice was quieter than before, careful, like she wasn't sure what she would find on the other side of the conversation. I stepped aside immediately. "Of course," I said. She walked in slowly, glancing around the apartment, taking everything in, as if trying to understand the life I had been living without her, without remembering her. "It's smaller than I expected," she said. I gave a small, uncertain smile. "I don't remember what you expected," I admitted. That almost made her smile. Almost. She turned back to me, her expression shifting again. More serious now. "I saw the record," she said. The words landed softly. "But they changed everything." I nodded. "I thought you might." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the bracelet, held it up between us. "I didn't believe you," she said. "I know," I replied gently. "I thought—" She hesitated, searching for the right words. "I thought you were just trying to make yourself feel better, like rewriting the past." "That would have been easier," I said. She looked at me for a long moment. "And it's not true," she said. "No." Silence settled between us again. But this time, it wasn't hostile. It wasn't heavy. It was fragile. Like something new trying to form between the cracks of everything that had been broken. "I don't know how to do this," she said finally. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, and for the first time since I had seen her, I heard it. Not anger, not resentment, but something deeper, vulnerability. "You don't have to," I said softly. "We can figure it out together." She let out a small, shaky breath. "I spent 30 years hating you," she admitted. "I know. I told myself you didn't care," she continued, "that you chose to leave. I didn't. I said, 'I see that now,'" she whispered. The words hit me harder than anything else she had said so far, because they weren't loud, they weren't dramatic, but they were honest. And honesty was something we had never had before. I don't remember everything I said carefully, but I remember enough to know that I loved you. Her eyes filled slightly, but she blinked it back. "That's the part I don't know how to trust," she said. "I understand." She shook her head. "No, I don't think you do," she said, "because for me, loving you meant being left behind." The words hurt, but they were real. And I wasn't going to run from that anymore. "You're right," I said. "I don't fully understand what that felt like for you." She looked at me surprised. "But I want to," I added. "And I'm not going anywhere this time. That seemed to land somewhere deep inside her, because her expression shifted again. Not completely, not all at once, but enough. I don't know if I can forgive you, she said. I'm not asking you to, I replied. She frowned slightly. Then what are you asking? I took a small step closer. Just a chance, I said, to show you who I am now and who I was if we can find her together. She looked down at the bracelet in her hand, turning it slowly. Lucy Emerson, October 14th. I built my whole life around a lie, she said quietly, and now I don't know what's real anymore. I nodded. That's how I've been feeling since I woke up, I admitted. That made her look up, really look at me. And for the first time, I think she saw it. Not just the woman she believed had hurt her, but someone who was also lost, also trying to piece together something broken. You lost 30 years too, she said. Yes. The realization hung between us. Not as a competition, not as a comparison, but as a shared truth. Two lives shaped by the same moment, the same day, the same lie. I don't know if we can fix this, she said. Maybe we can't, I admitted, but we can try. She hesitated. Then slowly, she nodded. Okay, she said, just one word, but it felt like the beginning of something. Not forgiveness, not yet, but possibility. And sometimes, that's where healing starts. The first conversation didn't fix anything. It wasn't supposed to. Healing doesn't happen in a single moment, not after 30 years of silence, pain, and misunderstanding. But something had changed. Something real. Rachel didn't leave immediately after saying, okay. She stayed, not comfortably, not easily, but she stayed. She sat on the edge of the couch, her posture tense, her hands folded together like she didn't quite know what to do with them, and I stayed across from her. Not too close, not too far. Both of us navigating something neither of us had ever learned how to do. So she said after a while, her voice hesitant, "What do you remember?" It was a simple question, but the answer wasn't. "I remember pieces," I said carefully. "Not everything. Not in order." She nodded slightly. "Like what?" I took a breath. "There's a park," I said slowly. "A small one, with a swing set that creaks when you push it too high." Her eyes flickered, just for a second. Encouraged, I continued. "And there's a little girl," I said. "She has this laugh loud, fearless, like she doesn't care who's watching." Rachel looked down at her hands. "That could be any kid," she said quietly. "Yes," I admitted. "It could." Silence again. But this silence wasn't empty. It was searching, trying. "I remember holding someone's hand," I added. "Small, warm, like I didn't want to let go." Rachel's fingers tightened slightly. "I remember that too," she said before she could stop herself. The words surprised both of us. She looked up quickly like she hadn't meant to say it out loud. But it was too late. It was there now, between us, a shared memory. Small, fragile, but real. "You used to hold my hand when we crossed the street," she said, her voice softer now. "Even when I got older and said I didn't need it." A faint smile touched my lips. "That sounds like something I would do." She let out a small breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "Yeah," she said. "It does." For a moment, just a moment, the distance between us didn't feel so wide. But then, reality settled back in. "You came back before," Rachel said suddenly. The words pulled us both out of that fragile moment. "I tried to," I said. "You came to the house," she continued. I remember that. I swallowed. And you wouldn't let me in. Her expression tightened. You didn't make sense, she said. You kept saying things that didn't match anything I knew. It felt like you were trying to rewrite everything. I wasn't trying to rewrite it, I said gently. I was trying to understand it. She shook her head slightly. I didn't see that she admitted. I know. And now she hesitated, searching for the right words now. I don't know what to believe. That's okay, I said. She frowned. No, it's not, she said. I've always known what to believe. About me, I said. Yes. And now you don't. She nodded. I leaned forward slightly. Then maybe that's not a bad thing. She looked at me confused. How could that not be a bad thing? She asked. Because certainty built on something false? I paused. Isn't really certainty. The words settled into her slowly, uncomfortably, but she didn't argue. I feel like everything I built my life on just shifted, she said. That's how it felt when I woke up, I replied. She studied me again, more carefully this time. You really don't remember leaving, she asked. No. Not even a little. I shook my head. Just the feeling that I wouldn't have done it, I said. She held my gaze for a long moment, and this time she didn't look away. I used to wait for you, she said quietly. The words came out of nowhere, but they felt like they had been sitting inside her for years. Every night, she continued. I would sit by the window, just in case. My chest tightened. Sorry, I whispered. I told myself you were coming back, she said, even when everyone else stopped saying it. Tears filled her eyes now, but she didn't let them fall. Then one day, I just stopped waiting. The finality in her voice hurt more than anything else, because I could feel it. That moment, that shift. The moment hope turned into something else, something harder. I don't expect you to forgive me, I said softly. She shook her head. I don't even know what I'm supposed to forgive, she said. You didn't leave. No, I said, but you still felt like I did. She nodded. That part is real, she said. Yes, I agreed, and that was the truth. Not simple, not clean, but real. I don't know how to fix that, she said. Maybe we don't fix it, I said. She frowned. Then what do we do? I hesitated for a moment, then answered honestly. We build something new. The words hung in the air, unfamiliar, uncertain, but possible. New, she repeated. Yes. She looked down at her hands again, then back at me. And what happens to everything that came before she asked? I didn't answer right away, because there wasn't an easy answer. It doesn't disappear, I said finally. But it doesn't have to define everything either. She sat with that for a moment. She sat with that for a moment, letting it settle, letting it exist. I don't trust you yet, she said. I know, but I don't hate you the way I did yesterday. That felt like something. Small, but real. It'll take that knit, letting it settle, letting it exist. I don't trust you yet, she said. I know, but I don't hate you the way I did yesterday. That felt like something. Small, but real. It'll take that, I said gently. She almost smiled again. Almost. Then her expression shifted. Serious again. There's something else, she said. My chest tightened slightly. What is it? She hesitated. Then, he knew, she said. I didn't need to ask who. Thomas. He knew what happened to you, she continued, all these years. I nodded slowly. I thought so. Rachel's eyes hardened slightly. I don't know what to do with that, she admitted. You don't have to decide right now, I said. But I do, she said. Because everything between us, it's because of that decision. She wasn't wrong. 30 years of distance, 30 years of pain, all rooted in one choice. I'm not asking you to choose between us, I said. She looked at me surprised. I'm asking you to choose the truth. That landed differently. Not as pressure, not as a demand, but as something clear, something steady. Rachel nodded slowly. I think I'm just starting to, she said. And for the first time since she walked through that door, I believed her. Healing doesn't arrive all at once. It doesn't sweep in and erase the past or make everything make sense again. It comes in moments, small ones, unexpected ones. And sometimes it comes when you're not ready for it. Rachel didn't leave that day, but she didn't stay long either. I need time, she said as she stood near the door, her hand resting lightly on the frame. I understand, I replied, and I did. More than she probably realized, because I needed time too. Time to understand who I had been, time to understand who I was now, time to figure out how to stand in front of my own daughter without feeling like I was walking through someone else's life. I'll come back, she added. Not a promise, not quite, but something close. I'll be here, I said. That at least I could promise. She nodded once, then left, and just like that, the room felt quiet again, but not empty, not the way it had before, because this time the silence didn't feel like an ending. It felt like space for something new. The next few days were different, not easier, but different. Rachel called. Not often, not for long, but she called. At first, it was practical things. Do you remember anything else? Did the doctor say how long the memory loss lasted? Do you still talk to anyone from before questions? Careful, controlled, but underneath them, there was something else. A need to understand, a need to rebuild the story she had lost. And I answered everything I could, honestly, even when the answer was, I don't know, especially then, because this time, there were no lies between us. One afternoon, she came back. No warning, no call, just a quiet knock on the door. When I opened it, she looked different, still tired, still guarded, but softer, less certain, and somehow more real. Hi, she said. Hi, I replied. She stepped inside without waiting to be invited, like she belonged there, or like she was trying to. I went through more of the records, she said, setting her bag down on the table. There's a lot, I said. She nodded, more than I expected. She paused, then reached into her bag and pulled out a stack of papers. Medical reports, dates, notes, pieces of a life I didn't remember living. I read everything she said. I swallowed, and she hesitated, not because she didn't know what to say, but because she did, and it mattered. You were here for months, she said, after the accident. I nodded slowly. That's what they told me. You didn't recognize anyone, she continued. You couldn't remember basic things, your name, your address, nothing. I listened carefully, because even though I had been told this before, hearing it from her felt different, more real, more grounded. They listed you as cognitively impaired with partial memory loss, she said. I let out a small breath. That sounds about right. She looked up at me then. And they tried to contact family, she added. My chest tightened. Did they find anyone? She shook her head. No response. I closed my eyes briefly. Because I knew what that meant. Thomas had known. And he hadn't answered. They documented everything Rachel said, every attempt, every call. Her voice shifted slightly, harder now. And no one came. Silence filled the room again, but this time it wasn't just between us. It was filled with something else. Something shared. Something understood. I'm sorry, I said quietly. For what, she asked. For not being there, I said. Even if I didn't choose it, you still had to live with it. She looked at me for a long moment. Then, that's the part I'm still figuring out? She admitted. Which part? She exhaled slowly. How to be angry at something that wasn't your fault, she said. The honesty of it hit me hard, because she wasn't hiding anymore. Not from me, not from herself. You don't have to figure that out right away, I said gently. But I do, she replied. Because I spent my whole life directing that anger at you. Her voice softened, and now I don't know where it goes. I stepped closer. Not too close, just enough. Maybe it doesn't have to go anywhere, I said. She frowned slightly. What do you mean, maybe it just changes, I said. She considered that, quietly, thoughtfully. Then she looked down at the bracelet in her hand. She had been carrying it again, holding on to it, like it meant something now. October 14th, she said softly. The day everything changed. Yes, I said, but not the way I thought, she added. No. She looked up at me, and for the first time since she walked into that apartment, there was no distance in her eyes, no wall, no barrier, just emotion, raw, unfiltered. And then Mom, the word slipped out quietly, almost like she didn't mean to say it, almost like it surprised her as much as it did me. But it was there, real, clear, and everything inside me stopped. Because I hadn't heard that word in decades. Not from her, not like this. Mom, she said again, more certain this time. And just like that, 30 years of silence broke. Not all at once, not completely, but enough. Enough to let something through, enough to begin again. Tears filled my eyes, but I didn't hide them. I didn't look away, because this time I wasn't losing her. I'm here, I whispered. And for the first time, she didn't turn away. Healing doesn't erase the past. It doesn't rewrite the years that were lost or soften the nights that felt too long or give back the moments that should have been shared but weren't. But sometimes, it gives you something else, a chance. Not to go back, but to move forward with the truth. Rachel didn't rush forgiveness, and I didn't expect her to. In the days that followed, we found a rhythm, slow, careful, but real. She would come by in the afternoons, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with questions, sometimes with nothing but silence. And we would sit together. Not as strangers anymore, but not quite as mother and daughter either. Not yet. One afternoon, she brought something with her. A small, worn feuille. "I found this," she said, setting it on the table. I frowned slightly. "What is it?" She opened it carefully. Inside were photographs, old ones, edges faded, colors softened by time. My breath caught, because even before I fully recognized them, I felt them. A pull, a connection. "This was in the attic," she said. "I never looked at it before." She handed me the first photograph. A younger version of me, smiling, holding a little girl in my arms. The same girl I had seen in fragments, in flashes, in feelings I couldn't fully place. Rachel. My fingers trembled slightly as I traced the image. "I remember this," I whispered. She looked up quickly. "You do?" "Not like a clear memory," I said. "But it feels familiar." She nodded slowly. "That's something," she said. It was. More than something. It was a piece, and pieces could be put back together. We went through the box back together. We went through the box together. Photo after photo. Moments I didn't remember living, but somehow still felt connected to. Birthday cakes, park benches, messy kitchen counters, ordinary moments, but meaningful ones. And with each image, something inside me settled a little more. Not fully, not completely, but enough. At one point, Rachel held up a photo and hesitated. "What?" I asked. She turned it toward me. It was us, standing by a window, my hand resting gently on her shoulder, her head leaning slightly against me. "I remember this," she said. Her voice was softer now. "You used to stand with me like that when I couldn't sleep." My chest tightened. "I remember the feeling," I said. "Not the moment, but the feeling." She nodded. "That's how it feels for me too now," she admitted. We sat in silence for a moment, but this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was shared, understanding. A few days later, Rachel asked me something I hadn't expected. "Do you want to come with me?" she said. Where? I asked. "To the house," she said. I froze. The house, the place where everything had started, the place where everything had fallen apart. "I don't know if that's a good idea," I said carefully. She nodded. "I don't know either," she admitted. "But I think we need to face it." I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw it. Strength, not the kind her. And I saw it. Strength, not the kind that pushes things away, but the kind that moves toward them, even when it's hard. "Okay," I said. The house hadn't changed much, at least not from the outside. Same porch, same windows, same quiet street. But standing there, that pushes things away. But the kind that moves toward them, even when it's hard. "Okay," I said. The house hadn't changed much, at least not from the outside. Same porch, same windows, same quiet street. But standing there, it felt different, heavier, like the air itself remembered what had happened there. Rachel walked up the steps first. I followed slowly. Each step felt like crossing into something I wasn't sure I was ready for. She opened the door, and we stepped inside. The smell hit me first, faint, familiar. Something about it tugged at me deep instinctive. "I think I remember this," I said softly. Rachel glanced back at me. "Me too," she said. We moved through the house together, room by room, carefully, like we were walking through a memory neither of us fully owned. The kitchen, the table where we had that last morning. I stopped there, my hand resting lightly on the edge. "I remember something here," I said. Rachel nodded. So do I. We didn't say it out loud, but we both felt it. The argument, the tension, the moment everything changed. I wish it had been different, she said quietly. So do I replied. But wishes don't change the past. Only what we do next can. Later that evening, we sat on the porch, the sun setting slowly in front of us, neither of us speaking for a while. Then, I don't hate you, Rachel said. The words were simple, but they carried everything. I looked at her. You don't have to say that, I said. I know, she replied. But I want to. I nodded slowly. Thank you. She took a breath. I don't know if I can forgive everything, she admitted. I understand. But I want to try, she added. And that was enough. More than enough. Because forgiveness isn't a moment. It's a process. And she was willing to begin. She looked over at me. Mom, she said. This time. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty, just truth. And I smiled, not because everything was fixed, but because it wasn't broken in the same way anymore. I'm here, I said. And this time, we both believed it. Some wounds don't come from what people do, but from what we believe they did. For 30 years, Rachel carried a story that shaped her pain, her anger, and her understanding of love. And for 30 years, I carried a truth that no one was willing to hear. But the moment we chose to face the truth together, everything began to change. Not instantly, not perfectly, but honestly. Sometimes, the people we think hurt us the most were never given the chance to explain. Sometimes, silence is not abandonment. And sometimes, forgiveness isn't about forgetting the past. It's about allowing the truth to rewrite it. If this story touched you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever misunderstood someone you loved? Or held onto a story that turned out not to be true? Share your experience in the comments. And if you believe in second chances healing and the power of truth, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories like this. You never know which story might help you see your own life a little differently. Some of the deepest wounds in life are not caused by what actually happened, but by what we were led to believe happened. We carry stories in our hearts about the people who hurt us, about the ones who left, about the love we thought we lost. And over time, those stories harden into truth. They shape the way we see others. They shape the way we see ourselves. But what this story reminds us is that not all truths are complete, and not all pain is rooted in reality. Sometimes the people we blame the most were never given the chance to explain. Sometimes silence is not abandonment, but circumstance. And sometimes the hardest thing we will ever have to do is to question the version of the past we've held onto for years. But here's where the real courage lies, not in being right, but in being willing to be wrong. In choosing to listen even when it hurts. In opening your heart even when it's been broken before. Because healing doesn't come from proving someone guilty. It comes from discovering the truth and deciding what to do with it. Forgiveness is not a single moment. It's a journey. And sometimes it doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It means understanding it differently. It means allowing yourself to see the full picture, even if it changes everything you thought you knew. If this story touched you in any way, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever misunderstood someone you loved? Or held on to a belief that turned out not to be the whole truth? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments. Your story might help someone else feel less alone. And if you believe in second chances, in truth, and in the quiet power of healing, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that stay with you long after they end.